wonderful people. Good to have you here. Love to have a bit of a flick through. As people who've been with me a few times now know, I love to have a bit of a flick through the attendee list as people wander gently into the classroom. I'm mindful that it is mid-semester break for our Victorian teachers. So if you are a Victorian teacher in the session today, can I say congratulations just on having the dedication and the energy to be here today. But can I also congratulate you on the fine work and the resilience you've shown in getting to this point. It's been one hell of a ride, and you've been remarkable. So to have people in the room today, and just looking, I can see a few Victorian names there. I'm so pleased that you're here, and we're going to try and do everything we can to get you here. Spot on, Georgia. So Georgia's already picked up on one of the features of the Zoom webinar platform that you have available to you, and that is that there's a chat box there. So I want you to remember that. I don't want to have any conflict today, just to use the theme of the webinar to get things cracking. I don't have any conflict about what's your job and what's my job. Okay, and I'm always mindful to remind everybody who is in session today that you're not watching a TV show. You can be a part of this. You can interact. In fact, when we're discussing something like conflict, I'm going to come at you with some philosophical things that I think we've gotten wrong around conflict, and that we can shift, and that we can get some movement out of, but also some practical things that I think you can use straight away in your classrooms to get some improvement around the ways that we approach conflict. So that might require some discussion. So there's a couple of things you can do. Number one is, just like Georgia, you can use the chat box. So feel free to put some comments in there, even if you want to say hi now, or tell me how you're feeling today, tell me where you're coming in from perhaps. Oh, Sian saw my poem. Thank you for checking that out, Sian. We're going to send that out tomorrow in a little bit of a blog. We put it on the socials a day or so ago. So we'll get that out. So if you don't know what Sian's talking about, you'll be able to see what that poem is tomorrow, because I'm going to assume that you're, by virtue of being here, that you're on our mailing list. So feel free to make comment in the chat box. You'll see me periodically. Just go and check it out. So you'll notice that I don't look directly down the camera perfectly the whole time. Not designed for that. But you can also even contribute verbally. If you want to put your hand up at any stage, you'll see a little button there that'll allow you to put your hand up in the panel. And I can even, there's a button here that I've got that's called Allow to Talk. It'll be in a classroom. I can acknowledge you for having your hand up. If you've got something you want to chew on for a minute, I firmly believe that anything you want to discuss is going to be of benefit to the room. So let's do that, okay? So conflict, hey, and resolving conflict. Why am I running a video tutorial about resolving conflict? Well, first of all, I say resolving conflict with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek. And that is because I don't think we mean it. I don't think that most schools are genuinely out there looking for a way to resolve conflict. I think that what we're looking for is to dodge conflict. I think that we're looking to avoid conflict. I think that we're looking to eliminate conflict. I think that we're petrified of conflict, and that's got to change. So like I said, I'd come at you with something philosophical to begin with. We've got to stop viewing conflict as a negative. Sure, it doesn't feel wonderful when you're in conflict, but that doesn't mean it's a negative. And so what I want to begin with is say, could we actually understand and recognize the research behind conflict in relationships, and get ourselves to the point where we say conflict isn't something to be dodged, avoided, or eliminated. It's actually something to be expected. Now, that doesn't mean we're targeting it. That doesn't mean that we're trying to get conflict. But what we are doing is expecting that it will show up in a normal relationship. So a couple of researchers called Lasada and Fredrickson, they got together, and I quite like this research, and they got together and studied relationships and looked for their functionality and how functional or otherwise, how dysfunctional those relationships might be. And what they found was and interestingly, the man gets his name on the research, Marcel Lasada, funny that. What they found was that there's a range around what they call the Lasada ratio, and it is, for every one negative, I think it's 2.9014 positive. So if you can just remember that. For every one negative, you have to provide your students with 2.9014 positives. You can have a really functional relationship. I don't think remembering that 4 decimal point digit is the point. And I like the idea that it basically rounds off to 3 to 1. I think that, and I've heard teachers use what they call the 3 to 1 rule, where they feel that if they say something negative in the classroom, they have to kind of pepper it with 3 positives to get the equilibrium back into their classroom. I think that kind of makes sense to me, and I've heard people say that. That if you walk over and you tick a student off at a particular table, you've got to say, but I love what you're doing and that's fantastic and keep trying. Because the funny thing about Lasada and Fredrickson's work is they found that the interactions, it's not so much about how heavy or how meaningful they are, it's actually about quantity. It's actually about how many, not how much, not how heavy, not how big a deal all of those interactions are. And around 3 to 1, there's a range there, so you don't have to be spot on, but around 3 to 1 tells us that we're in the right zone for a functional relationship. When we slip down the other side, when we get down to about 1 to 1, so this is because we do hear those negative comments that are made towards us. We do hear it heavily, it sits with us. When we get down to that 1 to 1 range, people tend to clock out of the relationship. So what this is telling us is that when we're in the 3 to 1 range, we have the right amount of conflict. We have the right amount of negativity. Even in the very best relationships, there is an element, approximately 25%, of negativity, of conflict. It's to be expected. I don't know about you, but we sometimes say to our school communities as leaders or as teachers, we want our classrooms or our school to be like one big family. I cannot think of one person in my family who I haven't had some sort of conflict or negativity with. Not one. All right. I love them all. I love them all. Great relationships with most of them. But we have an element of negativity in it. It's just when it gets a bit too big and it gets down to that 1 to 1 range, that what we find is that people clock out. They actually step out of the relationship. So if you think about the student who's always getting negative feedback, you think about the parent who's only getting a phone call from you when their child has done the wrong thing. And what happens is they stop answering the phone. They don't reply to your emails. They don't show up to your meetings. Students wag class. You know, teachers, when we feel like we're getting picked on all the time, we take sick days when they're unnecessary because we just don't want to be there anymore. We get out of the functionality of that relationship. And here's what is interesting about Lasada and Fredrickson's work is that once you get down to the other side, where it gets out to about 6 to 1, where for every 1 bit of negativity, there's 6 positives, we clock out of that too. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel rich. It doesn't feel authentic to be constantly told that you're fantastic when you're really not even trying. So there's a lesson here for us in terms of our students, because what happens here for our gifted and talented students is that they keep getting told that they're fantastic for hitting standards that were designed for someone else. And what we end up with is a cohort of gifted and talented kids coming through who have no resilience and no ability to seek risk and challenge. And that's a problem. Okay, so what we're looking for is for everybody in a really differentiated kind of way to experience a relationship around 3 to 1, which means we've got to say conflict's coming. The negativity's coming. People are going to feel a little upset at the feedback that I give them at some stage, and so am I. So let's bring it on. So what are we looking for here is we're looking for not to eliminate or to worry about conflict. We're looking to just have our way of dealing with it. How are we going to handle it when it comes along? What's the replicable? What's the go-to? What's the we don't have to think about a new way to tackle this problem because we have already decided it kind of way of tackling it? And I recommend that every school has already sat down and worked out what's their way. I'm going to recommend one way to you today, but this theory came to me once when I was attending a speech by a fabulous speaker called Michael Henderson. He and his wife Shah run a business where they consult to like a lot of the really big bodies around the really big companies, really big multinational businesses. So they're in the boardrooms of BHP and Coca-Cola and those huge businesses. And they tell them the way that in their marriage, they solve problems. And they said, we fight, no holds barred. You are allowed to say whatever you want, holding hands. Now, can you imagine telling a boardroom of stuffed shirts and suits at BHP that they have to fight holding hands? Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I certainly know that in my marriage, that's not going to happen. We just think that that's probably not our way. And they go on quickly to say, it doesn't matter if you don't like that way, but they aren't prepared to leave that boardroom until that group has agreed what is their way. If you're not going to fight holding hands, what is it that you're going to do? Can you agree about that in advance? Because the last thing you want to do when you're in conflict, you're feeling a bit of negativity, your limbic system of your brain's kind of fired up, there's a little sweat on your forehead. The last thing you want to do is have to design a conflict resolution technique before you get to the conflict. Do that in advance. Be ready is what we're looking to do when it comes to conflict. And you could choose the old way. You could say that the way we've been resolving conflict in schools is having a really positive effect. And what I would say to you is that the old way anchors the situation in a particularly unhelpful state. And that state is the past. So I'm wondering how many of you have ever launched what you might call educational CSI, where students come to you because they've been a conflict at recess, and you go, oh boy, now I have to begin. So I have to take my teacher hat off, I have to put my detective hat on, and I have to listen to your side of the story because you're really upset. Sorry, I should be showing more empathy, shouldn't I? But then once I've done that, I have to listen to your side of the story, because if I don't, you will go absolutely bananas. And then these two stories that I've got in front of me, they don't match. And I'm not there. I've got no idea why these two stories are so far apart, but it was probably predictable. So what I've got to do now is call witnesses. So I get to go out and try and find out which other students were in the vicinity. I get to go and check a timetable to see who was the teacher on duty. Do they have any idea what's going on here? And that full 1 hour episode of educational CSI has begun. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because what we're trying to do is to place ourselves at the scene of the crime. We're trying to get a vision in our head of what's happened here, because we're trying to apportion blame appropriately. We're trying to get ourselves to a point where if I can get my blame split right, that I can hand out an appropriate penalty where people will feel that they've been, at least there'll be a perception of fairness. The problem with that is that the students just take you deeper and deeper into the past, because all they're trying to do is to mitigate the chance of a negative outcome upon themselves. So you hear two different stories, because the only way to manage this system, this judicial style system that we're deploying in our schools, the only way to manage that as a student is to lie. At the least, it's to exaggerate. Maybe it's to omit, maybe it's to just slather mayonnaise over your story to make it sound better, throw in a few extra adjectives if that's what you've been working on in class. If you're really Machiavellian about it as a student, you'll have already pulled the witness in. And you'll be able to say, Kathy saw it. Kathy saw what happened. She'll tell you what happened. You know the system and you play the system to tilt it in your advantage. So the chances of a negative outcome on the other person are high, and the chances of a negative outcome on you are low. And what you'll do is go further and further and further into the past to do that. Well, he pushed me. Well, that was only because last week he stole my cricket bat. Well, that was only because the week before that you stole mine. Well, that was only because 3 years ago your brother took my cricket bat, and that was ever. And we go back and back and back. I've even had conversations with students where there's been generational issues, where it's because your dad beat my dad up in high school. Really? That's what we're working on now? We do not need to use a system that is anchored in the past, which means that we have to stop using this judicial style system. Schools are not judicial systems. We deploy sometimes because of the way we went to school ourselves and we haven't really stopped to think or to challenge it. We deploy sometimes some judicial means of working. Do the crime, do the time. Okay? But it's not teaching anybody. And the issue we've got around why conflict is still an issue in our schools is because we haven't got ourselves to a point where we're prepared to see schools as learning systems. And no matter what, whether it's academic or whether it's behavioural, and when it's behavioural, there's always a chance of conflict. We haven't decided yet that we're going to treat conflict as though it's a learning opportunity. And there's a way that you can do that. And it's about abandoning a system that anchors the situation in the past. Just realised I've turned my camera off there. So what I was saying was, don't choose a way that anchors the situation in the past, but choose a better way. And what we have here are a set of restorative questions. So what I'm putting to you today is that you need to choose a restorative way of moving forward when it comes to conflict. Now, I show these questions, I'm only going to show them briefly, because what I don't want to do is give you the impression that, and this is an impression that gets taken in a lot of schools, is that when they see these questions, they go, oh yeah, I've seen these question card thingies before, but I haven't got time for this. Every time there's a low-level conflict, I don't have time to sit down and ask a whole bunch of questions and, and try and remember what they are, or pull the business card thing out of my pocket and hope that I've got it with me. I haven't got time and the energy perhaps to prepare myself to do it that way. So what I want to show you about these cards are, first of all, if you would like the printout of these cards or the PDF of what these cards look like, and these questions, you want to reflect on those a little yourself, then in the chat box today, just put the word card. If you write card, we will send you the PDF of these question cards so you can look at them at another time. You don't have to memorize them now. That's absolutely fine. So lots of people coming in there with card. Good. Once you've written the word card, sit back, fold your arms, because what I'm going to point out to you is that the questions on these cards don't need to be remembered. You just need to know that the questions have a function. And the question's job is to take the situation that you find yourself in from past to present to future as quickly as you possibly can. That's all they do. So if we work down the questions there for the students who've done the wrong thing, what happened? And listen to their side of the story. It may be the greatest load of baloney you've ever heard in your life, but what you'll do is engage them. And that's really important. We don't need our students who have done the wrong thing outside in the yard sort of cry, going, well, don't worry, just listen to her. You don't listen to her because she turns on the waterworks every single time. We don't need them clocking out of our system. We need them in. So listen when you ask them what happened. Ask them what they were thinking at the time. You get two very common answers there. I don't know, and nothing. And I love that, because it often gives me, if I do have time to sit down and ask that question, and I'll often follow it up with another question, which is, well, could it have helped if you were? And you see these year 5 boys look up to the left and then up to the right, go, yeah, maybe. And they're thinking about their own thinking, which is important, because thinking always precedes behavioural shift. Ask them, what have you thought about since? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So we give them the opportunity to regret. This is really fantastic. They're no longer at a point now where they're trying to blame other people or trying to tilt the scales in their favour. We're actually now at a point where, I shouldn't have done that. So who's been affected by what you did? And in what way? What do you reckon those people are feeling at the moment? And what do you reckon you need to do to make things right again? You can see they can be done really colloquially, really casually. And if you don't have time, you can skip one. You can change them. I'm going to be really honest with you. I cannot remember the last time that I actually asked a student what happened. I'm an intensely restorative practitioner, but I cannot remember the last time that I asked a student those specific 2 words. I'm kind of always colloquializing it a little bit. I'm always going, so what was the story with that? What was going on there? What was that all about? Because all I'm doing is trying to go from past to present to future. So please remember this. These questions are not a script. They're a guide. And they guide you through that forest from past to present to future. That's all they do. And the questions on the other side there, what did you think when you realised what was going on? What's the impact been on you and even on your friends? What's been the hardest part about all this for you? And what do you need from this other person so that you can move forward? And what's funny about this is it takes students who are, perhaps, I don't like using the word, but in the victim role in this scenario, it takes them out of needing retribution. So we won't often say the hardest thing for you is that I feel really scared about him. Well, him going inside and getting detention for 2 days isn't going to fix that. He's just going to plot revenge, and they know it. So I just need him to, promise to play safely with me. I just need him to, go for a whole week without, being mean to me. Whatever it is they come up with, it's an outcome that we can support them to have achieved, and therefore we get to thank and congratulate them for doing that. The problem we have with the old system is that we've predetermined the outcome. We already know exactly what we want them to have because we've got the blame split in our head. But when we take a restorative approach, we don't compare ourselves to an unreasonable or to an unachievable outcome. We just say, let's run the process and see what they come up with, and we'll be comfortable with that to move forward. So why is the restorative model more effective than the adversarial model? So the key features of each model, if we unpack them for just a moment, number 1 is that in an adversarial model, the focus is the past. So of course the students anchor their attention there. Of course they try to give you stories and exaggerate those stories because their story is all they've got. It's the only way that they can play this system in such a way that they don't get the highest possible punishment. Well, let's be really honest. When we're placed as human beings in an adversarial system, We tell slight white lies as well. We even employ people called lawyers to help us tell those lies. All right, so we constantly try and do whatever we can to mitigate the chance of a higher fine or a higher penalty, whatever it is, because we're trapped in an adversarial model. The preoccupation or the focus in an adversarial model is the blame. Can I work out whose fault it is and how much it's their fault? And what's the fundamental belief that sits behind that? It's that deterrence is linked to punishment. So the whole notion here is that if I can get my punishment split right, if I can get that sort of 70, 30, 50, 50, 80, 20, 90, 10, 100, 0, whatever I think is right, if I can guess that correctly and hand out an appropriate punishment, or at least a high one, then I will deter this behaviour from happening again in between these students. Now, if that stood to reason, if punishment, if a high level or an appropriate level of punishment was stood as a handy deterrent, then the highest possible punishment you can imagine should deter even the highest possible crime. You know, so let's look at the death penalty as being the highest possible punishment. That should thereby, in countries that deploy the death penalty, be reducing the amount of violent crime they see. How's that working out for the United States? Not so flash. And the reason is that I'll give it its dues. I'll give it its credit. It's a great punitive system. Awesome. Because once you're dead, you commit no more violent crimes. Absolutely true. But we're not a punitive system. We're not a judicial system. We're not a preventative system. Sure, you can give a student 2 lunchtimes for pushing over another student, but we haven't changed anything about the conditions or the likelihood of them perpetrating that crime again when they come back out, because they haven't learned anything. They've just plotted revenge and demonise you during that 2 lunchtimes. Moving to a restorative model says that we're going to split our focus from past to present to future. That's it. We're going to split our focus from past to present to future. Now, that can feel, when I'm unpacking this for you, as though I was just seeing Mim's comment about it's all interesting when I lose the plot of the technology. It can feel like I just tripled your workload. No longer are we stuck in the past, but we're going to go past, present, future. But we're going to be determined about being quick. Really fast at every possible opportunity. So instead of running 1 hour CSI and then coming up with some sort of judgment that means that half the room's going to hate you, okay, let's say, what if we went from past to present to future inside 2 or 3 minutes and we just got them to do something and we said, that's a good fit, that's a good result, let's keep moving. That's what we're looking for. The emphasis in a restorative model is on the harm. So instead of saying whose fault it is that something has happened, we say, what's the damage? We could argue if a student, for instance, drops a chocolate milk in your classroom and there's chocolate milk all over the floor and there's a broken drink container. We could argue forever about whose fault it was, how they were moving, should they have even had the drink at that time, did they bump themselves on the door or did Matthew bump them? We could go, how hard did Matthew bump them? It wasn't hard enough to drop a drink out of his, yes it was. We could do a lot of conversation about that and get absolutely nowhere, and there's still a broken drink container and milk all over the floor. Or we could clean out the mess. We could say, what's the harm? And we usually, in a restorative model, say we'll talk about what's the harm between people. And the fundamental belief that sits behind this is that deterrence, the likelihood of not doing it again, is improved by the notion that you're trapped in a sound, supportive, relational system that says that when you screw up, you clean up and you get thanked for doing it. You are personally accountable to the relationships that you impact positively and negatively around the school. That's all. And we're going to help you to be able to do that. Let's see if I can change slides this time. I'm nervous. Oh, amazing. All right. How to do this, number 1, is what we call in a restorative model an effective interaction. So an effective interaction is, thanks Leah, I feel very proud of myself. An effective interaction is basically for all the stuff that, I reckon this happens. I reckon my average for use of effective interactions is roughly 3 or 4 a lesson. Obviously, depends where I am, and it depends, what day of the week. It depends on the temperature outside. It depends. There's so many variables, but I reckon my average is about 3 or 4 a lesson, where I will need something will happen in the class that it's kind of worth a chat. It's above the grade of just disappointed to see you do that. Put it in a bin. It's above the grade of, I'm frustrated, give his pen back. It's, hey, we have a quick yarn about this. And so it might be a student, for instance, who's work refusing. You know, and you've reminded them several times to get started. You know you've provided enough instruction. You can see the students around them who are doing the right thing, but they're still just sitting back there, you know, having a great time trying to distract people. Okay? And at some point you decide it's worth a chat. And so you might take a chair over and put it next to that student and say, hey, what's the story with not starting your work? Now you'll notice that's a past-based question. You're asking for the story. What's been happening? And can I encourage you about something here? Once you've asked that question, shut up. Because our students, they're not used to this system. They don't like this system. Hang on a sec. You know, he's asking me a question. I didn't know I had to actually participate in this conversation. You know, and they're gonna make it clear to you that they don't want to. They're gonna make a noise that sounds a little, if you sort of, you know, lean your ear in, it sounds a little like I don't know, but it's actually just and I'll sit. And you've got to sit. So I have a rule for myself in this situation because I'm a talker. And if I start talking, if I start saying, you know what, Craig, I can tell you now exactly what's going on here, mate. I've asked you 3 or 4 times and I've provided all the support you need to get started and you still haven't started your work. Why haven't you started your work, mate? Oh, I don't know. Is it just Craig? Is it just Craig? Because you just feel like not starting your work today, mate? Because I can tell you now, I know you're as capable as everyone else at this table. And 1, 2, 3 other students, they've all been able to start their work, but not Craig. No, Craig decides that he's going to waste more of my time, doesn't he? And when I unleash a really good speech like that, I'm good at it. I really am. The issue is that Craig's not thinking anything. He's just, if he's thinking anything in his head, it's usually something along the lines of blah, blah, blah. And he's let me, it's so low effort for Craig in that situation. He gets to do nothing but wait. Easy, you know. But if I say, what's the story, not starting your work? He goes, I go, no worries, I'll just give you a moment to think. So that's, I'll go to 7 seconds and I'll say, do you need a bit more time to think? And my other question I'll ask is, would you prefer we talked about this at recess? Because I'm putting the heat on here. You know, what do you, and this is what I reckon goes on in Craig's head. I reckon he goes, why the hell is this big freak staring at me? What's he doing? Why isn't he talking? He's supposed to be telling me off. I don't know. What do you want to know? What's starting? I don't know. And I'll get something out of Craig along the lines of, no, I was just being lazy. Now, we feel a bit like we should tell Craig off at that point for being lazy in our class, but it's the truth. I asked a question, he gave me the truth, he was being a bit lazy. So instead of telling him off for it, I thank him. Mate, I really appreciate that. That's honesty. Thank you. You know, how do you reckon that's making me feel? And what about even the people at your table? No, I don't know. You look kind of annoyed. Yeah, I am, mate. I'm annoyed. That's a fair answer. You know, and the people here, I don't know, they're probably a bit pissed off with me too. Yeah, probably don't appreciate the language, mate, but yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. And then I'll ask, what are you going to do about that? And Craig will most likely give me the answer of, I don't know, start my work. That'd be good, mate. And can I say, this is where you need the second stare. Because what I'm relentless about here is the opportunity to thank and congratulate Craig. So I'm going to sit, I'm going to, yeah, that'd be good. Oh, and when Craig picks up the pen and hits it, I get to say, good one, mate, thank you for that. I give him a little gentle tap on the shoulder and I'll move on to the next table. So the great part about an effective interaction, and most of the time these can happen in about a minute or two, the great part about an effective interaction is it flips a negative behaviour through conversation, going past, present, future over a minute or two into a positive that I get to thank and congratulate Craig for. I'll take that nearly every single time. You know, that'll deal with most of this level of behaviours in your classroom. Here's the good news as well. If you can be monotonously boring about this way of solving conflict when students are not using behaviours that you want to exist in your classroom, and it's worth a chat. If you can be really boring about doing it every single time, what's the story with this behaviour? How come you're doing that? Tell me about this. What's going to happen is the second time I go over to Craig and I put a chair next to his table, I go, hey, Craig, he's going to go, all right, and put the pen on the paper, and I'm going to go, thanks, mate, appreciate it. So it'll get shorter and shorter and shorter the more you commit to this truly boring way of resolving conflict. Hoping that makes sense to you. Now, there's one other gift that I want to give you today. I'm a firm believer that that great teaching is 90% theft. So what I want to do today is give you a little gift, and it's called P3P3F3. Now, the little pro forma that you can see on the screen there is something that we've put together. A lot of our schools use it. Either they have like a little tray of maybe 20 of them in the classroom whenever conflict comes along for groups. What about you? Social group conflict is probably the thing that scares me most in schools. And I'm going to be slightly gender biased here. Because when a group of girls comes to a male school leader and says, Mr. Voigt, we have a friendship group problem, my heart races, because that's an hour of my life that I will never get back. And they often leave after that hour, and I'm left thinking, you know, I think I made that worse. Because all I did was let them anchor the situation in the past, and they dug up a whole bunch of stuff that they hate about each other that they'd pretty much forgotten until then. So I'm not being effective. And so I came up with P3P3F3. Like I said, some schools have these in a little tray in the classroom so the teachers can pull it out whenever they need it. Some schools blow it up to like an A3 size where they laminate it and students can use text on it to be able to facilitate conversations when there's group issues. And if you would like this little PDF that you can see on the screen there, again, just go into the chat box, P3P3F3, that's all you need to type, P3P3F3, we'll send you a little PDF. I'm going to show you how this works now. All right, so the way that this works is that if the students come to me and they say, Mr. Voigt, I've got a friendship group problem. She hates him, all this sort of stuff's going on, argy-bargy. I'll say, no worries, please come in. I've got a circle of chairs here in my office, and I set my office up so that we were ready for that. Sit down, I've got 9 minutes to help you. And already they're looking at me, hang on, this is supposed to take a full English period. No, 9 minutes, yeah. And so I commandeered a bit of my whiteboard that I had up on the wall. I sort of got rid of some yard duty timetables or something and created a space roughly about the size of an A3 piece of paper. And I made these 3 boxes on the board. And I put them in permanent marker so they could never go anywhere. And then I took a whiteboard marker and I said, for the first 3 minutes, and I set the timer on my timer on my iPhone, and I put it down. First 3 minutes, all I want you to do is tell me what happened. Tell me what's gone wrong. And they, well, I go, and I'm writing on the board. And they're saying, well, you know, she won't speak to me anymore. She wrote a nasty note about me. She put something on Facebook about me. She didn't invite me to a birthday party. She stole my boyfriend, you know, all these sorts of strange things, like I said to girls. They do my head in. Love them, but they do my head in. Are all up there in that box. And then my timer goes off because I have to interrupt them, because otherwise I'm going to run out of room in this box. They're really, really good at this box. Why? Because it's about the past. So it makes sense that they're really good at this box. So I make sure that I've got that box. I cut that off. And can I give you some special sauce to put on your P3P3F3 efforts? When you get to that 3 minute timer and it goes off, one of them will try to stop you. One of them will try to say, Mr. Voigt, I haven't told you yet about the way that her mum spoke to my mum at netball last week. And I have a 3-word answer ready in my neocortex for that situation. And it is, I don't care. And I don't. And I don't. It's really important to train our students around conflict to get to the point and not to pad it out with superfluous fluff. Okay? And that's what they're doing when they're telling me about the way that her mum spoke to her mum at netball last week. Okay, it's not necessary. It's not part of the problem. Get to the point. Now, a lot of people ask me sometimes around this, what happens if somebody takes over? What happens if someone doesn't speak? Now, the good part I guess the good news here is that my experience has been that about 80% of the time, the students ensure democracy, a weird informal democracy takes over, where if they can see the timer counting down or they can see me saying that there's 45 seconds left, they kind of make sure that everybody's had at least a few words to say. And that's a good thing. Let them do it. In another percentage of cases, maybe 15 or so, 15% of cases, I have to have a little bit of what I would call slightly structured democracy, where I might say that, you know, hey, Chantal, you haven't actually said what you said anything, and I've noticed there's 20 seconds left. You've got a contribution to make, and I'll just make sure that somebody gets included. And then only in the rarest, probably 3 to 5% of occasions, have I had to actually say, right, everybody's going to get 30 seconds. And the reason I don't like going to that is it's just not a normal conversation. It's not an authentic conversation in that situation. So what we've got is that we've over-formalised something that's basically informal at that situation. So I don't do it. Because let's be honest, in a normal group conversation, if somebody says something and you agree, you don't have to repeat what they said. You just get to go, yeah, pretty much what Janet said. Let them do it. Let them have an unstructured, informal way of dealing with that past, dealing with the past. Once I've got it up there, I go, fair enough, thank you, I really appreciate that. Because I'll put no names up there, there's just behaviours. I can see how that isn't working for you, so thank you for letting me know. We're going to go down to the second P3 now, and I go bang on my timer. 3 minutes has begun. And then the 3 minutes for the middle box here, I want you to tell me about the present. I want you to tell me how this is making people in this room feel. Go. Well, it's making me sad, it's making me angry, it's making me annoyed, it's making me anxious, it's making me frustrated, it's making me depressed. Someone always says depressed for some reason. Okay, so I get all these words up there. And what do you reckon? Do they usually fill the 3 minutes here? And the answer is no. They often run out of time. And so I go, fantastic, I'll just stop the timer there and I save myself a minute or two. Happy days. And then I say, we're going to look at that. Like I said, well, I'll say something to you that's completely mathematically incongruent. I said it's 90%, great teaching is 90% theft. I'm also a believer that it's 90% theatre. So I'll look at that and I'll tap that middle box, that P3 with all those unfortunate feelings descriptors in there. That's no good. Can't have that. Now, I really like you people. You know, I really think you're fantastic. And to have you people feeling that way in my school, can't have it, can't have it. So what I want you to do for the next 3 minutes, timer's on, is tell me what are you going to do in the future about that F3. Everything you say in the next 3 minutes is going to begin with, I am going to, and not she should. Go. I'm going to delete this off Facebook. I'm going to invite her to my next party. I'll have lunch with her tomorrow. I'll give her boyfriend back, whatever it might be. And I put an asterisk next to the one for me. And so that's my action, which might be, I'm going to come and see you on Friday and see if this is all worked out or not. Oh, good. 3 minute timer goes off. I go, thanks for coming. And I say 2 more very important words. Get out. Go back to class. Go do some learning. That's what you're here for. I'll often then take a photo of that picture on my wall of the P3, F3. I might go and send that or print it off and give it to their teachers so that they don't have to go through this. They know it's been done, been dealt with. And I might even send it home by email to a couple of parents because I may be aware of a couple of parents of those students who need to see that the school has acted before their son or daughter comes home and says that the school didn't do anything about it. My job is to make sure that I follow through. It's to facilitate a fantastic 9 minute conversation and then boot them out, and then to follow up on Friday, because what I'll follow up on Friday is I'll call them out for 5 minutes. I go, right, can I just check here? It says here that Samantha, you're going to delete something off Facebook. Did you get that done? Yeah, I deleted it straight away. Fantastic, Samantha. Thank you so much for that. It says here that you were going to have lunch with this person for Thursday and Friday. Did that happen, Matthew? Yeah, I did that. Yeah, good, no worries. And if it hasn't been done, I get to say, well, how long is it going to take? When do you need? So I put the support and the expectation in place that it does get done. But mostly what I'm doing is standing there thanking and congratulating students for doing the work themselves. That's my job. That's it. And then if I need to send something to parents, I get to say, send a message that then brings them back into the right 3-to-1 ratio that Lasada and Fredrickson recommended for me, because then I get to ring some of these parents who might be parents that are sick of getting that call from the school that their child has done something wrong, and say, I went and spoke to your child today about a conflict that happened on Tuesday. They said that they admitted some of the things they'd been done. They understood the impact of it on other people and they took action. And I thanked and congratulated them for doing that. And I just reckon you should know, because I'm really impressed, and I reckon you thanking and congratulating your kid when he or she gets home will be a good thing. Again, this flipping of a negative situation that seems so complicated and complex, and being able to flip it quickly within a couple of days into a whole heap of positives. That's what we're looking for. It's all we're doing when we're in a restorative model. This is my way. Group situations, as I mentioned before, social group conflicts between students, particularly female students, but not always, between about year 5 and year 9, they do my head in. I need my way. I need my agreement about how I'm going to tackle that. Now, the great part about P3, F3 for me is that I lose it after a while. It gets handed on. So after I've had the same group come in and I've facilitated a 9-minute conversation 2 or 3 times, as they walk in, students used to show up, Mr. Boyd, we need a P3, P3. Right, I come in, and as I walk in, the last student who walks through the door, I hand them the whiteboard marker and I say, you know what to do, I'll be back in 9 minutes. Happy days again. I go off and see a couple of people and do some other work stuff that gets me away from the desk for a minute. Happy days, good stuff. At a group of students, so I get to hand over gradual release of responsibility for conflict resolution to my students. I mean, seriously, it's 3 steps. I've had year ones that can learn this. I walk in, I say, guys, when we've got a problem, how do we solve problems between people here? We go past, present, future, Mr. Voigt. Spot on, we do. They know how to do it. So why can't most of our students learn this? Do we really want to be the kind of educators that solve our problems for our students all the time? Or do we want to skill them up to be great navigators of the issues that are inevitable between people? Well, I like the second option. So I hand it over to them. I let them learn it. I let them use it. I let them take responsibility for it. My favourite P3, F3 story was I was working with a group of students who had come to me a few times and I'd helped them with this stuff. And I'd been trying to hand over responsibility to them. I did notice that they weren't coming to me quite as often. I thought that's a good thing, maybe. Or have they decided that I'm not giving them enough time, so they're just taking it underground? And I saw them sitting together outside on the concrete one day. And I was on yard duty. I walked past and said, "Hi girls, how are you?" And they said, "We're good, Mr. Voigt." I said, "I haven't seen you much lately for P3, F3. You didn't like it, or what's the go?" They said, no, we still do it. I said, "All right." And they said, "Yeah, there's one over there on the concrete." And they'd done one in chalk on the concrete and worked out their problems themselves. And I'm completely obsolete. One of my students who I bumped into her mum about 5 years after I'd left the school. And I said, "How's Hannah?" And she said, she's really good. She goes, "Actually," she said, "you came up at the dinner table a few weeks ago." And I said, "Really?" And I thought, and she said, "Yep, we asked the kids who their favourite principals were." And I went, "Oh." And Hannah luckily had said the right thing. She said, "Mr. Voigt," which is a good thing. And I thought it might be something about the wonderful learning environment that I set up at the school. And I said, "So," she said, "Do you want to know why Hannah said that?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, Hannah said, "Because Mr. Voigt made us solve our problems in 9 minutes." Rather than letting them go, I thought, I'll take it. Okay. It's a skill that they can use forever. And Hannah had at least remembered it for the next 5 years after she left my care and had gone into high school. And I reckon that's a pretty cool thing. I'm so nervous about changing slides now. So why do you bother? 1 is you get simplicity of process. There's only 3 steps. 2 is you get consistency of process. So you take the fun out of it for kids who might be boundary testers and who might be wondering what you're going to do that particular day because you seem a bit tired and cranky and I could get a decent show out of Mr. Voigt today. No, boring monotony. 3 is you save time. I hear these myths about working restoratively sometimes that it takes too long. I mean, my goodness, it saves me 51 minutes every time there's a social group problem in my school. I'm taking that and running. Effectiveness has increased in that I haven't made the problem worse by making it pass-based and encouraging them to dig up more. I haven't disappointed anybody by coming up with an arbitrary punishment that really is based on a guess. I've helped them solve the actual problem. That I can actually gradually release the responsibility to them helps. That I'll reduce the propensity for lying is a great bonus. That I'll reduce the need for myself to do guessing and judgment. I don't like it. I really don't. I hate being made to guess about whose fault something is. And I hate having to punish someone based on the inaccuracies of my guess. Now, that's really tricky. There's increased student thought, and therefore, if I can generate a higher level of thinking when I solve conflict the right way, then I can get them to shift behaviour more effectively. There's increased responsibility, there's increased empathy, and finally, for me, I found a system that matched my purpose for the way that I want to work with young people, and that's why working this way for me works so well. Emily's got a question there. What do you do if only half the group comes to you to restore their friendships? Yes. So I restore it for them. So what I am on about is making this process famous. I want it to be people that talk, something that people talk about and go, "It was really cool. We got this done. Mr. Voigt was awesome." And, and we feel really good about it. And what I'll often say to students who don't want to be a part of it is I'll tell them the truth. And sometimes I've even gone to the point of putting it on two post-it notes and saying, we've got two choices and they're entirely yours about how we deal with this. There's a 9-minute conversation to be had in my office and not a second longer. Or on post-it note number 2, I have to guess about whose fault it is and hand out punishments. Which one do you want me to do? And so I just want to be clear that if you choose the one that's a punishment one, I'm going to do the best I can at the best guess, but it might not work well for you. So I just want you to know that in advance before you choose that. So I'm not about to say that I'm going to bring students into this conversation who don't want to be there and I'm going to try and hijack the whole thing or wreck everything, and I'm not doing this is stupid, okay? But I'm giving you the chance. I'll give you the chance to come in and do it if you'd like to, but otherwise I'll have to guess. Are we ready to play the odds today? I hope that answers your question, Emily. It's a really, really pertinent one, really good one. I've written a book, then there's a section about conflict in this book. So I think Simon's going to pop up in the chat box somewhere, a link where you'll be able to go and buy this. I've been very excited by the fact that I've actually had to fork out a lot more money, which is not something I'm usually excited about. But we've sold out our first print run of Restoring Teaching, which is really exciting, and had to order a whole bunch of new books today. So if you would like to get a copy of Restoring Teaching, then please click on that link. And Emily's just waiting for yours to arrive. Yes, we're trying to trust Australia Post from Victoria at the moment. So there's some challenges there. So hang in there, Emily. I hope that it gets to you soon. Oh, Karen's already ordered. Chantel, you've already got it and you love it. Oh, I'm chuffed about that. Thank you. What else can you do? So as educators, we've got an academy, and this one about this little section around conflict is one tiny part of one course in Real Schools Academy. So we are doing an intake every term. It's a 6-week supportive course, and there are 18 courses that you can choose from depending on where you're at. So there's a beginning teacher faculty for people in their first year of teaching. There's an establishing faculty for teachers who are in that year 3 to 5 sort of range. And there are also, there's also a leadership faculty for people who are kind of getting your bags packed, putting some tools together to be able to step into school leadership. 6 courses in each faculty. And at the moment, they're $175. Now, I don't think you can get a 1-day PD for $175 these days. And this is a 6-week course where every week you provide with a new video, heaps of resources, connected to a bunch of other people, connected to a local mentor in your school across the trip. It's actually fun. It's not something that's going to add to your workload. It's something that you're actually going to really enjoy doing. And if you want to have a chat, Amy Green, our Associate Director of Teacher Education, she's happy to help you out with that as well. I'm just looking through questions here. Mim, I've got a number of coaching clients who say they're doing restorative teaching. Could you please let me have a copy of this to encourage them to consider your course, please? Yeah, absolutely. So, Mim, if you, I'm going to give you an email address at the end here, Mim, and if you send me an email with exactly what you're looking for there, we'll make sure that your people get what they need to be able to do that. So I want to encourage you, a couple of links there. If you want to chat to Amy about it, you can. And if you want to jump straight into Academy and sign yourself up for a course, you can absolutely do that too. And then the final thing I want to mention today is we've got another video tutorial next week on the one thing that I think has been impacted more in 2020 than anything else in education. We've had a lot of chat about kids missing out and falling behind and the stresses of being at home and student well-being and mental health. And I reckon the thing that's taken the biggest hit this year is the morale and the well-being of our staff. We're going to present to you next week a new and a really exciting way of looking at staff wellbeing. No longer should staff wellbeing be somebody's job where it's put on a badge that says that I'm in charge of wellbeing at our school. No longer should staff wellbeing be defined by a random yoga lesson or Friday afternoon drinks. Staff wellbeing is about all of us pulling together around a really succinct set of skills. And we're going to unpack some of that for you next week. So I'm going to be joined next week by Amy Green. She's going to give me a hand with this one because she's a subject matter expert in this area. And I reckon you should register for that. And I reckon if you're not a school leader, you should take that registration link and flick it to yours. It'll be something that they're going to get an enormous amount out of. So I'm just checking. Yes, Alice, you're going to get a recording of this session. Hope that it's valuable to you. awesome. Oh, just wanted to be able to say goodbye to you. That email address that I promised me a moment ago is info@realschools.com.au. Go and check out the website. Give us a call if we can help. I really hope you've had a fabulous afternoon. I'm going to do my usual thing where what I do is stick around. I noticed that I can see the Q&A box. I'm going to open that in a second, see what's going on there. So, Leah says, I still need an ed support session. I really do. You're absolutely right. Yep, I'm just going to have to wear that one on the chin, Leah, and make sure that I get around to it at some stage, aren't I? So I'm going to bring it into action now that I have a bit of good on you, Emily. I'm so pleased to hear that the second time round you've gone, right, now I get it, now I've got the courage. That's really good to hear. I'm going to stick around. If you've got any comments to make, whack them in the chat box until I see the attendee list go down. But apart from that, adios. Enjoy the end of term 3. If you happen to be on break already, enjoy what breaks at hand. We've got a big final term to come. Keep an eye out for the newsletter tomorrow, where you will hear that famed, very amateurish poem that is my dedication to teachers in 2020. Enjoy.